It was supposed to be one of, if not the last, delivery of the night for me. I was working at this pizzeria called Leonardo's. One of my bosses, John, was on the night shift with me. He would choose who does what delivery. We got an order for a couple of regular pizzas. He gave me a piece of paper with the address on it and the person's phone number. This was in 2009. I didn't have a cell phone with GPS, just a bare-bones flip phone. I also didn't have one of those Garmin GPS devices. I still had to use an old-school book of maps to find my way around when doing deliveries. The name of the street for this house I was delivering to was something along the lines of Willows Road. I can't remember the house number, nor do I remember the name given for the order, but I do remember having the hardest time finding the place. It was in this really rural town with nothing but woods, farmland, and more woods. The lack of street lights also didn't help. I had to pull over a few times and turn on the interior lights as I checked the map again. It was a very stress-inducing situation. Whenever I couldn't find a house, I was on a very quiet, dark, and confusing road when I decided to just call the number on the paper my boss gave me. The phone rang a bunch of times. It seemed that there was no answering machine set up. It had to have rung about 10 times before someone picked up. I waited for someone to say hello. When no one did, I said it, and then a voice on the other end said it back. It was a low, deep, yet soft voice. I said, "This is the pizza guy. I'm just having a hard time finding your place." He explained that his driveway was easy to miss and looked like just a dirt trail. He talked in a very slow, monotone voice as he described the surroundings of his driveway to help me find it, and eventually, I did. I turned my car onto this pretty narrow dirt path. It was definitely easy to miss. It took about 30 seconds of me driving slowly and carefully up it until I saw this small one-story house come into view. There was a faint orange glow from inside the house that could be seen through one of the windows. I parked my car next to the only other vehicle in sight, this beat-up pickup truck. I grabbed the 2 pizzas from the passenger seat and walked to the front door of the house. I looked for a doorbell but couldn't find one, so I knocked on the door. I heard muffled music from inside the house, then I heard footsteps approaching the door. After maybe 10 seconds, the door cracked open, and I saw a quarter of someone's face. I literally could just see one of their eyes peeking out at me. I nervously said, "Hey, you ordered the pizza, right?" The guy said, "Oh yes, the pizza." I recognized the voice from the phone call before. There was a weird pause. I didn't know what to say except for, "Do you have the cash?" He said yes and let me go get it. He walked away from the door, and I heard his footsteps move to another room. There was super old music from the 1930s playing, making the setting just extra creepy and weird. If it weren't creepy enough already, the door started slowly inching open on its own, revealing more and more of this dimly lit room. Everything about the interior of this place seemed super old. There were metal sheets on the floor, presumably covering holes in the floor. The couch looked like it was from a different century. Hell, all the furniture did, and the music was coming from a vintage-looking record player, one of those with the big horn-like thing on top. That's all I could see at first from just sneaking a nosy peek inside the place, but what really was off-putting was the smell. It smelled like death in there. I waited respectfully for the guy to come back with the money from wherever he went. When enough time passed that I felt like it was getting weird, I knocked on the open door, took a peek inside, and said, "Sir." The man's voice came from another room, saying, "Yes. Would you mind coming into the kitchen, please?" My coworkers and bosses always advised against stepping into anyone's house if you didn't have to. That advice seemed especially relevant for this circumstance. I heard what the man said, but I still responded, "Can you repeat that?" He repeated, "Can you come to the kitchen, please?" I stepped inside and I honestly felt like my feet were going to crash through the floor. The place was so old that the floor actually caved in a bit as I stepped around. The house was very linear. I looked to the right and saw the entrance to the kitchen where his voice was coming from. I looked to the left, and there was a narrow hallway with a bunch of doors on the right side. At the end of the hallway, there was this guy with his back to me, slowly dancing in the creepiest way imaginable. The man was feeling himself. I don't mean he felt confident. I mean he was literally feeling his body as he moved in this really off-putting way. In any other circumstance, I would have laughed, but I was downright disturbed by the kind of house I had just walked into. I turned away and looked toward the kitchen, still holding these 2 pizza boxes. I took a few steps toward the kitchen before I even noticed the person peering around the edge of the wall separating the kitchen from the living room. It was that man's face again, still only showing like a quarter of his face, just one of his eyes creepily peering at me. The only thoughts I had in this moment were, "What the hell?" and "Should I just leave?" Leave, I repeated what I said at the front door moments ago, asking him again if he had the cash. The man didn't respond. He started to just giggle, or I don't even know what I'd call it because the laugh was so deep and pitchy, but it was so subtle and soft. Then he called out, "Randall," in a startlingly loud voice, much louder and more commanding in tone than his previous soft-spoken monotone voice. I was at my limit of how much weirdness I could take. I turned around and started walking back to the front door. As I took a look down the hallway, as I was about to walk outside, I noticed that the guy who was dancing seconds ago was now simply just standing there, looking back at me. I left through the front door and closed it behind me. I hurried back to the car, for some reason still holding the pizzas. I threw the pizza boxes in the passenger seat and got back in the car as quickly as possible. As I was backing my car up to clear the pickup truck next to it so that I could do a 3-point turn, I looked back at the house. The door was fully open again. My heart started beating even quicker at the thought that one of them was outside my car, about to attempt to open one of the doors. Maybe they were, and I'll never know, but I managed to get my car down that dirt driveway and back onto the road. I had to return to the pizzeria. I called John to let him know what happened. He wasn't mad at me. When I got back to the pizzeria, everyone left. When I told them what happened, I can honestly see how it sounds like a funny situation when explaining it to others, but it was not funny in the moment. Whatever was going on in that house wasn't normal, and I don't think they had any intentions of buying pizza. I've had multiple dreams where I would see that man's face just peeking around from behind a wall. After that, I didn't enter anyone's houses or apartments while doing deliveries. I used to deliver for Uber Eats. I was having trouble paying off my student loans, so I was hustling to make whatever cash I could. I still lived with my parents at the time. It was late at night, and I was picking up an order from some fast food place in Wilmington, North Carolina, and delivering to a house about 20 minutes away. I often did late-night deliveries in Uber rides because the pay was higher, and I could bang out more deliveries and rides without traffic. I was already en route to the address, leaving the more populated residential area of Wilmington and heading in the direction of the quieter part with all the forest and farms. Most of the roads over there were pitch black and devoid of any other cars at that late hour of the night. I turned off the main road onto a side road with a dead-end sign. This was the road. The directions were taking me where the address was. I was brought to the last house on this road. The lights to almost every little house on the stretch were off. It was just pitch black, even the house that I was supposed to be delivering the food to. I had to keep my car headlights on just to see and so I wouldn't trip on anything. I was also using my flashlight on my phone to navigate my way to the porch of this house. I'm not lying when I say there was not a single light on. I even felt the overgrown grass rubbing on my shins as I walked to the front door. This didn't feel right. I pressed the doorbell button but didn't hear a ring, so I knocked. The customer had their delivery preference set to contact delivery, which means I'd have to actually physically hand it off to him or her. I messaged the customer that I was at the front door and asked him if he could confirm the address. He read it right away and responded, "Give me a second." I replied, "Okay." He read it. I waited in the dark, looking at the windows of the house, waiting for a light inside to turn on. I was thinking there's no way this is the right house. I followed up again, asking him if he could type out his address. He started typing. It took a while before he sent a message saying, "I see you. You're at the right house." The next thing I realized was that there were no cars anywhere. This was making no sense. I asked the customer to confirm what kind of car he sees outside. He replied that he sees my light. Well, that pretty much confirmed that I was at the correct address, but it didn't make this any less sketchy. I started to just inch away from the door of the house, just because I didn't want to be on top of it as they opened the door, but the door never opened. No matter how many times I messaged the customer on the Uber Eats app, I was starting to suspect this was some kind of scam to get free food. Then I heard a voice come from outside in the darkness surrounding me. It was a male's voice calling, "Over here." I started to wave my flashlight all over the place, trying to reveal whoever just said that. I said out loud, "I'm leaving the food on the front porch over here." I didn't know who I was talking to, nor could I see them. I was terrified I was about to be attacked, so I walked back to my car, not trying to draw attention by running. When I got to my car, I heard this distinct air leaking sound that I could immediately recognize as the sound of air leaking from a slashed tire. I took a look and saw that both the tires on the left side of the car were slashed and leaking air. I could only assume in the moment that the two tires on the right side had also been slashed. I got into the car and locked the doors. First thing, all four tires showed low tire pressure warnings on the dash. Panic started to set in. I was deciding on whether to call the police and wait in the car or make a run for it into the dark to a nearby house. I was about to pick the second option. I turned off the headlights on my car and was about to get out of the car, but I noticed someone standing outside my window. I screamed my soul out, and then I realized that there were at least 4 people standing outside of my car, one at every window. They all had on masks covering their faces. I was surrounded. One of them yelled at me to get out of the car now. I didn't know if one of them had a gun or not, and I knew that if they did, by the time I turned on the car and attempt to drive away with 4 flats, I'd have been shot dead already. I yelled through the window asking if they were just looking to rob me, and one of them said if I gave them everything on me, they'd let me go. I agreed to do so and unlocked the door. The second I did, the guy outside my door opened it and forcefully pulled me out. At this point, I was beaten and kicked by at least 3 of the guys. They grabbed everything off of me, my smartwatch, my shoes, my wallet, my phone, and even some things out of my glove compartment in my car. I was left on the ground as however many men there actually were ran away into the darkness, and I was alone that I blacked out from here, and the next thing I remember is waking up, probably half an hour later, still lying on the grass next to my car. They'd stolen even my keys. I managed to get up and navigate myself to the nearest source of light I could find in the distance, which was a small house all the way up the street closer to the main road. I rang the bell a few times until someone answered through the closed door. I said I'd been injured and robbed and needed to use a phone. Luckily, the woman was willing to help and allowed me to use a phone to call the police and then to call roadside assistance to have my car towed. Lastly, I called my dad. After the police showed up, I was taken back to my car, and they did a short investigation and took as much information as I could give them. After my car was towed away, my dad came to pick me up and bring me home. We left after my car was towed away. My phone's last location was down the street from the incident, and it hadn't been turned on since the night before, meaning they probably destroyed the phone. The next day, I gave even more information to some detectives regarding my Uber Eats account, and they were rather quickly able to trace the customer account back to a guy named Logan who, long story short, allegedly lost his phone and wallet. Whoever found or stole them was the one to call the Uber Eats delivery with the intention of robbing me. Basically, what I'm saying is whoever did this to me got away with it. The house that they set this up at was a vacant house for sale. My car tires were covered by insurance, but everything else, I ate the loss. This was a painful and expensive but also valuable lesson to not be so naive ever again in a situation like that. I stopped deliveries for a few months, then I went back to doing daytime deliveries. I had some spare time this night, and having chugged a few coffees earlier in the day, I figured I'd use this energy to go out and make some money. I was delivering for DoorDash, cruising on the highway to my next delivery. It was super late, the roads were empty and the night was very peaceful, basically every delivery driver's dream. On my way there, though, my phone started buzzing. It was the customer calling me, but before I had a chance to answer it, they hung up. Since it only rang for a couple of seconds, I thought it must have been an accident. But in case it was not, I redialed their number. It rang for a while, but they didn't answer. I shook my head and blew it off, not thinking about it for the rest of the drive. I got off the highway and drove into the neighborhood. It was a very regular street with average houses. When I got up to the house my delivery was for, I parked right in the driveway and started walking up to their porch. As I was setting down the bag, I saw that the front door was cracked open. I didn't know if it was meant for me or not, so I just lightly knocked on the door and called out that I was dropping off their food. As soon as I did, I heard a somewhat disturbing sound come from down the hallway. It was a muffled thump that almost mimicked my knocking, like someone was banging on a door. A bit shaken, I opened the front door wider and called out again. I wasn't sure what to say, so I just repeated myself, saying that I was delivering their food. A few quiet moments went by, then I heard a door open from the back of the house, and a guy came around the corner. He looked distressed and bothered, but I couldn't tell if it was because of me or something else. The guy walked down the hall and right up to the doorway I was in, not saying a word as he started to reach for the bag. But that's when I heard those thumps again from down the hallway. I looked past him in confusion as he turned and looked as well, then quickly turned back and looked at me, recognizing that I heard it too. "Is everything okay?" I asked carefully. The sound echoed through the walls again as the man just kind of stared at me, as if he were trying to think of what to do. "Why don't you bring the food inside for me?" he said, almost in a demanding tone. Nervously, I picked up the bag but quickly realized how terrible of an idea this was. I felt threatened, like I had to follow him, but I also had a feeling that if I did, I wouldn't be making it out of there. In my hesitation, the guy's face showed he was even more bothered, angry even. He then reached out and grabbed the food right from my hands, then slammed the door in my face. Stunned, I stood there and listened as his footsteps went down the hallway and the thumping stopped. I couldn't do anything else at this point, so I hurried off the porch and got back to my car. I ended my DoorDash shift after that one and ended up reporting the really disturbing scenario to the police. I think what ended up making me report it was that the man tried to get me to go inside his house. If not for that, I may have not felt there was enough evidence to do anything. Unfortunately, though, police informed me hours later that the man denied that anyone else was there and declined their request to search his home. At that point, there was nothing left to do other than speculate. I believe there was something truly horrible going on, and he was possibly ready to do the same to me, but I don't think we'll ever know for sure. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to watch the latest videos.